Hi, thank you all for joining us. We're going to begin in about 3 minutes. Hi, thank you all for joining. We're going to start in about 1 minute.
So hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jonathan Albaum, and I am the Principal Digital Strategist for the federal government at ServiceNow. And I will be taking over for Tom Suter today for ATARC's Thursday afternoon lunch IT webinar series. I'm going to get this great opportunity to moderate a fireside chat with some really great panelists. We have Eric Gallagher, who is the Chief Information Officer at the National Institutes for Health, National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, and Bavarius Peoples, who's the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They both have great stories to tell about their experience during this time during COVID-19 and their agency's response. I think it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to cover this overall framework for what life has been like for those of us in the technology sphere during this time, starting with how we immediately responded to the challenges at hand and how we're now taking those innovations that were created, the different technologies we purchased, and integrating them into our environments in a way that will ensure long-term readiness. Plus, this all drives us toward this state of very strong digital resiliency. And we're going to talk about the benefits of that, how we get there, and what comes next. So I just want to give a quick background on myself. As I said, my name's Jonathan Albaum, and I work at ServiceNow in a role that cuts across all of our federal customers. I work on digital strategies and the challenges of IT modernization and running an IT organization. I come to this job after having been a CIO in the federal government for a number of years. I worked largely at USDA. I was a CIO in one of the sub agencies at USDA, the Food and Nutrition Service. I worked at GSA for several years, and then eventually returned to USDA and had a great opportunity to work for the prior Secretary of Agriculture, who appointed me to become the Chief Information Officer for the department. And I was in that role for a little bit over 2 years, spanning the end of the last administration and the beginning of this one. And eventually left government and now work at ServiceNow in this strategy position. And I've had a really great time. Since I've left government, I've learned a lot of really interesting, unique things and been able to share the perspective that I've gained during my time as a CIO in government with those that I work with, and share back my perspective, having it now on the industry side, back with my colleagues who are still in government. So I feel really good about today's webinar. We have great panelists, and I think we're going to have a really wonderful conversation that pulls in a lot of what we talked about in the beginning. So, with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. I'd like to start with Devarius to give a little background on himself and his agency, and some initial thoughts as we get started. Devarius?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. Definitely thanks for the opportunity, and looking forward to the healthy discussion amongst professionals and peers. So again, my name is Devarius Peoples. I am the Chief Information Officer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We are a DoD entity or DoD agent under the Army. We are the Army executing agent for all construction. And so with that responsibility, we also have several other major critical mission areas in which it is that we provide service to the federal as well as to the department supporting the nation. One of those is actually the disaster relief mission, where we actually support local areas, states, local, with regards to flood management, hurricane, major disasters, even COVID-19. We're also, as I previously communicated, we are the military construction agent for all camp posts and stations, where we build things such as hospitals and those type of things to support readiness on the various posts. And then we have a huge civil mission. That civil mission where we interact with a lot of the levees, the locks, the dams. One of the interesting facts is the Army Corps of Engineers provides a lot of the safe waterways for a lot of DC. So, a lot of people don't necessarily know that, but that's one of the important aspects of the mission in which it is that we perform from a civil side of the house. And with that being said, we're about a $66 billion business, which is probably about 99 or 100 on a lot of Fortune 500 list. And that's rather interesting for a federal agency when you begin to look at the power of what the department does, because most people believe that's just tailored towards private industry, but no, the government does have entities that deal with that type of capital. So we are going through a major transformation inside of the Army Corps of Engineers as we support not just COVID-19, but the Data 25 strategies and many other efforts within the department. So definitely looking forward to the discussion, and thanks for the opportunity. Back over to you.
Thank you, Devarius. Eric, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Eric Gallagher. I've been with NCCIH for a decade as CIO, and before that, another 10 years at the NIH, working for the various institutes and centers. For NCCIH specifically, we research self-treatments an awful lot. Those include physical therapies, mind-body controls, herbal supplements, anything you can self-administer pretty much. And that's why lately we've done a lot of research on pain, because pain is the reason people self-administer so much. And it's really come up a lot, obviously, with opioid addiction, actually COVID-19 infection after effects, the general, I say, racial and cultural inequities in medical treatments generally, and cannabinoid research and a bunch of other stuff. So pain comes up an awful lot. And as it turns out, it's given us a little bit of an IT problem too, in that aside from all the analysis of brain scans and animal brain scans, we actually have to store all the data from all those brain scans and all the high resolution images of nerves and other parts. And as it turns out, we're starting to participate now in NIH Strides, which is an initiative to get data into the cloud and make it really useful and affordable too.
I'm sure that's really important as you try and share data with different research organizations that are looking at similar things relative to COVID-19.
Right. And so we absolutely partner up with other parts of the NIH all the time. We partner up with the FDA, with other parts of DHHS. Yeah, so we have to share the data a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great introduction by both of you, and sets the stage for our conversation. We have a bunch of attendees, and we are going to have some time for Q&A as we get to the end. And I just want to thank everybody who's joined the webinar for attending. I also want to just quickly thank my colleagues at ServiceNow who helped organize this. We all work very hard to get these messages and these stories out and create opportunities for people like Eric and Devarius to share. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? And Devarius, why don't you begin, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what those early days of response to COVID-19 were like at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, so the Army Corps of Engineers, we are a distributed workforce. We've been working in a remote capacity for quite a while. However, when the order came down and said, hey, to protect employee safety, we must go to a remote workforce, 100% workforce. We met that with some complexities that was pretty challenging to get over. Within the Corps, we own 2 major data centers, one in Vicksburg, Mississippi, the other in Portland, Oregon. And with that being said, one of our major service providers that provide telco to a lot of our data centers, a fiber got cut. That fiber got cut in New Orleans. So the distance between New Orleans and Mississippi is rather far. However, the power of communications and fibers range far and wide. With that being said, when that cut happened, it wiped out all the comms inside of the Corps. No email, no telephone. So you can just imagine how our remote workforce took to that. I mean, we already started off with a bad vibe, and it was more so, hey, IT can't get anything right. We had all the hate mail coming our way. So we were scrambling, trying to just get on the right foot. On a day-to-day basis before COVID-19, we had about 500 to 600 users regularly tapping into the VPN, and the VPN could hold about 5,000. So when the pandemic happened, we had to scale aggressively. We scaled to about 80,000 users in about 4 days. Currently within the Corps, we have about 36,000 users. So you can imagine 5,000, we were maxing out within less than 2 hours trying to play musical chairs with regards to who got on the network first, who didn't get on the network, managing tickets and those type of things. So it was a learning experience from just recovering from everything that has happened. But we were able to kind of scale pretty quickly, and with our mission partners, recover and be able to provide service. Good thing is now we've gotten to a point where we've stabilized a lot of the comms and we've been operating in a good posture. But definitely when things started, it was very rough.
Yeah, so that one, I think, your organization showed great resiliency to overcome the cut line, all the pressure that just existed in those early days because, people had to work, right? So congratulations to you and your team for, overcoming those immediate challenges. You mentioned that you really scaled tremendously. What do you think the key to being able to scale like that was?
Well, I think it was, having strong mission partners to be able to support us as we went forward. And then also having the ability to be able to rapidly acquire technology. Mm-hmm. We used several methods that assisted us. Granted, we didn't have new hardware. So we use refurbished hardware, working with some of our mission partners, one being out of Cisco. We all use a lot of the Cisco VPN capabilities, but working to get refurbished equipment, which provided us a Band-Aid fix until the new iron came in. That was really, really key for us, because if we hadn't been able to use that refurbished equipment and get it in so quickly, we could have been down probably for about at least a month, going through some of the heartburn. And as you know, with the Army Corps of Engineers, we built a lot of the support hospitals and those type of things, especially in New York and places. And our employees had to have access to a lot of the mission critical capabilities. So being able to use that refurbished equipment was probably a lifesaver for us in the Corps, that we kind of had to adapt to being able to be creative with regards to providing those services, and allowed us to be able to do that.
Yeah, thanks. That's good information. Eric, what was your experience like?
Different, but there's a real similarity. I can only mention part of it. When we switched over to 100% telework, you'll have noticed in the news, there were articles that HHS was under network attack.
Right.
So that's about all I can say about that, except that we were battling that at the same time as we were going to 100% telework. We did have the hardware. We did have to refurbish some hardware, but it caught us, as a lot of federal people will know, it makes a difference where it catches you in the property cycle. And this caught us in the right place. We had the property on hand. We had smartphones ready for senior staff. We had plans that we'd exercised already. We rehearsed epidemic scenarios for the flu twice. One difference for everybody here is that this is lasting longer than any of the rehearsal scenarios we had planned. But we had really set up for telework, even though we weren't completely ready for 100%. And that was the tough part, getting over the hump to 100%. We had a very good start. We actually had to transition some people's work in order to take care of some of our workforce rather than laying them off. We actually gave the last few people administrative work that's real and measurable, and asked if they would do it and stay on. And they said, yes, absolutely. So we were able to get everybody on. And the way we've done it, it was a tough first few weeks, but we're actually doing very well and picking up pace. I'd say we're responding better.
You mentioned that your organization deals with a lot of data, and have you seen any challenges in either data sharing or accessing data because people are off the main NIH network? I know NIH has a very robust network because all the optives deal with, all of the institutes deal with tons and tons of data. So I'm at home on my home internet connection with kids playing video games and watching movies and whatnot. I have to imagine that creates some challenges.
So one of the challenges is the amount of data that researchers want to access is, I mean, the NIH has a fantastic backbone. We've got great networking, but they want to access terabytes at a time. And you can't do it to a home very easily. So we have researchers who apply to come to campus to do analysis. And where you've had to come to terms with some of them and either allow them to do it or to provide SneakerNet for them, put a bunch of data onto a drive and let them walk it to their house. And all on federal equipment. We've even gone to the extent of allowing monitors and other equipment that we wouldn't have provided normally. In this long a telework duration, we've had to provide it.
Yeah, so I think you're both hitting on some interesting challenges around this transition. Whether it was you had a plan like Eric suggested, or you had some unknown occurrences like Devarius referenced. It doesn't matter. Things are going to be complicated in this kind of scenario. So I'm going to put up a poll right now. I'm curious what the audience's experience was around transitioning into remote work and being, moving to this sort of digital kind of organization. So hopefully you can all see that poll. I'm curious what people's experiences were. So if you can go ahead and answer, we'd appreciate it. And we can ideally share that information back before we finish. But moving on in terms of our conversation, Devarius, you made a point that you had to refurbish hardware. You had to procurement was very important. You were acquiring things, and people, it sounds like, were doing things very rapidly. You were building hospitals for people in New York, right? It's incredible when you can think back and understand what happened. So now you have all this new equipment and capability inside the organization. How do you ingest it in a way so it can be well managed and you can build a readiness for whatever happens next? When we work too fast, we can create some blind spots. We can acquire lots of things very quickly, but maybe we fail to secure them. So just curious what your thoughts are there.
Right, so our configuration management process is not as mature as we would like it to be. However, we do have a pretty good handle on the configuration management aspects of things. When it comes to technology in general, our rule of thumb is that first in, last out. Something comes in, something must go out. And that gives us the ability to be able to manage effectively. It's the same when it comes to hardware lifecycle refresh. If I'm bringing a new server in, a new switch, a new router, I'm bringing it in to either replace something that's faulty, or I'm bringing it in to either upgrade something that is either end of life and it needs to be decommissioned. So one of the things we try to do is keep accurate account of what comes in and what comes out. And that's kind of helped us out a lot as well too. One of the things that we saw with not just our server platform, but we even saw this with regards to our collaboration tool suite as well. Being that the core is so dispersed, we work in many districts and divisions inside of the United States. So we're at even the lowest of levels from the state and local area. And sometimes, unlike some of the other Army camp, post, and station concepts, being that we work in some of the downtown areas of the nation, some districts have many different requirements that force them to have the need to want a different type of collaboration capability or something like that. So being able to understand which tools were out there and be able to effectively converge everyone to a centralized capability, that was, I'm not gonna say so much of a challenge, but it did take some intense conversation because everybody likes to at certain times do their own thing or believe that their capability supports the mission the best. So some of the configuration management aspects of things, the convergence elements, we were able to converge on several mission critical capabilities, being out of WebEx and Microsoft Teams, specifically being out of CBR, which is the commercial remote environment that DoD is worked to push out. We were able to have collaborative sessions, be able to communicate effectively across the aisle and throughout the department. So that's just one aspect of how we were able to just consolidate and converge on a tool set, which goes back into the configuration baseline, making it easier to maintain.
And you had to do that while you're building hospital beds,
Yes.
So, all the more credit, your organization. Curious, did you have out of this, are you considering, an approach to software asset management or hardware asset management, configuration management to make sure as, we move forward, different things are going to happen that, you have a little more control over those changes to your environment?
Right. So we've worked to, I think, having a solid CMDB as well as an ITSM capability. So within the organization, we're on our modernization journey. So we have deployed some of the ServiceNow elements to help us manage and maintain some of these things. But one of the things we've also done is we've modernized our requirement gathering process and the lifecycle aspects. That's really helped us out throughout the pandemic because everything moves at lightning speed. Everybody needs something right then when they need it versus being able to wait weeks and weeks. We had to get it in hours and days. So, that kind of changed how we deliver services on the back end to meet the pandemic. That means evaluating your processes, making changes to them on the fly. And then once you've implemented, you assess to see if it worked, if it was optimal, and then you go back and change it where needed. So those are all the things that we did to be able to determine what was successful, what wasn't, as we began to modernize and change and adapt to the new now versus what some call the new norm.
Yeah. So, and Eric, from your perspective, were there innovations or changes that you and your team had to make to rapidly support the agency, support your institute as COVID-19 was becoming, so critical to the nation?
A bunch of things we had to change, even though we thought we were really well prepared. As a general thing, and I think everybody would sympathize with this, sometimes security equipment is also infrastructure equipment, and it has to be really robust. So we discovered, parts of the security infrastructure that needed to be a little stronger, a little bit more capable of handling the load. We almost immediately discovered that we were going to have special problems with distribution, getting equipment to people. We wanted to keep our IT people safe. And I think there's a special problem with, some parts of IT, those people move around a lot. They're definitely a way COVID-19 can be transmitted, and they're also vulnerable to it. So we had to come up with ways of getting machines to people. We started out by installing machines, putting it in a room, leaving it for an hour and letting the person come in, log in and pick it up after, you know, it'd been wiped down and sat for a while.
Right.
Uh,
That's
like that.
you know, a manual process, say, but it's one of these things that you probably never considered as
Yep.
core to your career as an IT professional, you know, and just, you know, kind of demonstrates how we've all had to, you know, evolve and, you know, do it very rapidly. I'm curious if, you know, either one of you can comment here. Is the people you support, you know, who are doing the mission work in your agencies, their expectations, I think, are changing in how they receive service and how you interact with them. Have you seen that? And if so, what do those changes look like? Eric, why don't we start with you?
Okay. For us, the changes have actually been kind of huge because scientists were used to getting together in conferences. All those conferences that occur several times a month are going virtual. And it's up to us now. IT, that's a different IT expectation. We're supporting conference after conference, just a different part of work that we really hadn't done. Other things, people who, for instance, had injuries, this gets back to the physical part again. Normally we would have equipment for them at work, maybe a standing desk, so that if they hurt their knee, this is from a real case. We went to 100% telework and someone immediately injured her knee and needed special equipment. Before we hadn't allowed some of that to go into a home, and we had to make decisions about how to do it, how to get it to them. But we decided absolutely we were going to support whatever we had to.
Devarius, what about your experience?
Yeah, so the harsh reality is in the Army, we have demanding customers. And the reality is they need it right then. I don't care what it is. Even if it's a pack of pencils or pens, they need it right now. So that's the same with IT. They always want it up. They always want to run it. And that is the standard that our customers hold us to.
And they thank you every day when it runs all day, right?
Hey, you know, my philosophy is if I'm not getting calls, then I'm doing something right.
Right.
But when I start getting calls, then that means, hey, I got something on my hands that I might not be too happy with when I hear what's going on. So from our users, what we try to do and what the pandemic has done for us, it has expedited some of the things that are on our technology roadmap that may have been in the 3 to 5 year column to where now it's pushed it out to the 6 to 8 month time frame because of the fact that we need it right now. Some of the things that we've done to adapt, good example, we are on O365 right now. And we're in that, being that you're on O365, depending on the sensitive level that you are within that environment, some individuals have access to OWA and some don't. And in the environment we were in, we didn't necessarily have OWA access from the internet. So we had to work with our cyber command providers and the rest of the Army to enable that functionality for our users, which allowed them to be able to access email without having to go through the VPN. Because one of the things, as we previously stated, we saw that going through the VPN was slowing down the network with traffic. So we had to alleviate that pain and that heartburn, and OWA was one of the main drivers because most people really only get on their computers for one thing, and that's to do email. So, you know, how can we help our users out? So we were able to bring some different things to our users, and now we've started this theme for the 21 fiscal year of untethering the end user from their desktop, more so promoting an enhancement of mobility. Because we want our users to be able to never have to come into the offices if they don't have to, but be able to do everything it is they need from their iPad, cell phones, to include the modernization of applications. So we've done a lot in that space, and we've identified what's needed. So for FY21, we've already started that journey. We had to pull some of those things to the left. So that's a good example of what remote work has done for us, as well as for the department. We'd be able to talk across the aisles from there too.
Right. So I've heard that from a lot of people that I've talked to. I've seen it firsthand. You know, schedules are shifting left, right? You're going to get things done sooner. You have to reprioritize. And not every agency is going to have additional funds to do these things. Eric and Devarius, do you want to talk about any trade-offs that you have to make as you adjust to what new expectations are for you and your teams?
Yes. So I mean, I could take that from our side. I mean, we've made a lot from a budgeting standpoint. We've kind of changed we run as a business, really. When you look at it from, even though we're an Army entity, we're funded by our district and division. So if they don't pay us, then we don't really have a job. So we have to show worth and value inside of the organization. So with that being said, we just try to stay on the front end of finding new ways to get things done and to satisfy them. So from a budgeting standpoint, the government doesn't have much. It's hard doing it, especially how we scope and identify our funds for the out years. So pandemics like this has really changed some of the ways in which we go about doing business. And we've made a lot of trade-offs with regards to pushing some to the right, some to the left, and really focusing on the modernization of collaboration tools and really enhancing the virtual remote aspects of doing work. So there's been significant trade-offs on our end.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
Aside from the fact that the NIH made the same O365 call to allow OWA, absolutely had to be done. We've had to make some different trade-offs as far as what our director thought of as privacy. So our institute did not put cameras in laptops. We bought them separately. Each time I came to the senior staff with a proposal to buy laptops with cameras in them, there was some security incident where students were spied on by the school board or something. It just always seemed like bad timing. This time, I came and said, we need cameras. And they said, of course. And so we made that trade-off. Now's the time when everybody really does want to meet like this and see faces. And we don't see enough as we are already. So that was an easy trade-off, but very different. Last year at this time, it was still a no-go.
Interesting. It's a pretty rapid change, right? And shift in thinking, just one of many. But we're going to put up another poll now about this idea of digital transformation and get a little retrospect on how organizations responded. So if we could put that poll up, let's see what the audience thinks about the transition to digital transformation in their organizations. And as we do that, just begin sort of our next, build on what we just discussed. We have too many times we talk about these great activities in the federal government, the opportunity to digitally transform or use data and these things. And these are great conversations. But then you look at the timeline for when they're going to get done. It's 3 years, 5 years out. But you were both describing this idea of shifting things left and having a real focus on using technology to drive the mission forward and doing so in a way that supports this disconnected physical distancing, this disconnection we have from our offices. So, I think the opportunity to have a digitally transformed government over the next few years is really high. And, the question asks, what's the process, where's your agency going? And I think if you can see the poll results, just a very small percentage, 5%, doesn't feel like they're thinking about it. Everybody else is either planning or working through changes, maybe even they're transformed. So, I think it's very encouraging. And so I'd like to turn, back to the two of you and, Devarius, if you could share with us digital transformation plans that you're considering at the Army Corps of Engineers, either because of COVID-19 or what you've learned or other things that are now really apparent opportunities for you and your colleagues.
Yeah, so within the Corps, before the pandemic, we actually started our digital transformation journey before the pandemic happened. The Corps, from an IT standpoint, we've put heavy emphasis in two areas, one being that of mobility, and then the other being that of data. Data modernization, data strategy, data transformation, and then our mobility aspects. So when those two worlds collide, the underlining equivalent there, digital transformation, it leverages an Equinix facility. And that Equinix facility gives us distributed services with a powerful connection regardless of where we are. Because as previously communicated, we currently operated in a construct of two disparate data centers that weren't necessarily with an active type of architecture, meaning that a proper failover and those type of things. So now we're moving towards an Equinix facility located, one in Ashburn, Virginia. The other we're looking at out in California. And we're also experimenting with several others in Chicago and Texas. But we're looking for that true triple active architecture. And also, how do we connect to the cloud? Leveraging some type of VCAP type of connection as well. Because one of the things we've realized is that in order to access data, which is the key underlying thing, how to access data and make more informed decisions with data through some type of data strategy, you have to be able to properly store those things. So we begin to explore other areas such as a service, being out of storage, and all those various components to enhance the meet me point or the digital transformation concept that we're putting in place through leveraging the Equinix facility. So there is a lot on this digital transformation journey with cloud baked in from a hybrid approach, because we have a good balance between on-prem as well as in the cloud. So we've been able to find what that sweet spot looks like, and working with our providers, we've started down that digital transformation journey that has definitely helped us evolve as an organization. So we're hoping to have that complete here, within maybe the next 4 to 6 months, because it does take time as well as funds to be able to work through those things, and not to mention the contractual processes
Right.
within the federal government. So, we had to bake all those things in, but the journey has started, and we're well on our way to really optimize.
Well, that is a great story, and I think it's proof that in a terrible situation like this, some good things can come out of it. You guys are moving forward, and you're doing so in a way that's going to provide long-term value. So, Eric, turning to you, what's the digital transformation plan at your institute look like, and has it evolved because of COVID-19?
It has evolved. It's evolved a lot and improved and modernized. But actually, we're also dealing with process improvement too. So for the NIH, we have a problem very different from the Army. We have to authorize people coming from overseas constantly. A decent percentage, maybe 20% of the NIH is foreign doctors coming in to do research or learn how to do research. That's been very different when you can't make physical contact, or you have different rules for physical contact. And so we're really restructuring parts of the system, upgrading technologies, but also upgrading the process itself, I would say.
So you both talked about process, and I think that's really, one of the, key elements for this idea of digital transformation, because so often, we have these very manual processes in our organization. We have, they're processes that we've created to fit the way systems work, and they're maybe not ideal. So, you have this chance to rethink and redesign how things can and should work as you invest in new technologies. And, most of the time, in my experience, when I built systems and worked in the government, was so much of what we're trying to do is take these manual workflows and digitize them, so we can have a better tracking of where things are. We know status, we provide better experience and service. So, if you guys want to talk for a second about those aspects of your organizations, and, have you seen the manual workflows that you rely on be challenged by the physical distancing and the difficulties with not being in an office or not being in your normal settings?
I will say that we rolled out an app really quickly for property tracking. It's a property that the NIH doesn't track very much, that NCCH wanted to track. And we really quickly went into SharePoint and had an app up in a week or two, and it's needed modification since, but we had to make that automatic and paperless and non-contact and get it done.
Well, yeah, that's right. You have different drivers focused on it, and the fact that you got something up quickly, even if it wasn't perfect, I think that's very much in the spirit of how we want to develop and publish applications, especially now as we have brand new requirements. Devarius, what about yourself? How do you guys feel about this, the workflow piece?
Yeah, so when we talk processes at times can either hinder progress or either it'll be an enabler. One of the things that we've looked at from a process improvement side of the house, you can't forget about the human element throughout the course of the pandemic, because we as people, we are used to that human interaction, the touch, the feel, those type of things. So with that being said, we've now been forced to be confined more into our restricted space. And one of the areas that we've seen from a process improvement and leveraging technologies to enhance that is our onboarding process. Within the organization, as with most organizations, when you first get into an organization, the first thing to do is give you a lot of either paper or to give you a system to log into to where you can start putting in a lot of your information, and you can work with the HR person to help you get through it. Not so much in this type of setting. Now you're doing everything either by telephone or through video, and that's with meetings, that's with onboarding or whatever the case may be. So one of the things we've had to do, we had to modify how we did our onboarding process. That means the escalation and elevation of getting a security authorization form all the way to getting network access. We automated the entire process to be able to do that. However, we also brought in an automation to the human element of interacting virtually with your onboarding counselor to ensure that employees that come on board have the same look and feel, to where they wouldn't miss anything, even though you weren't there to literally hold their hand in a physical sense. But virtually, we were able to walk them through those processes. And that's something that I believe we will continue to use even once the pandemic is over as a part of the new work norm.
Right. That's a great example of where, this has forced us to change the way we do business, looking at the processes like you're describing and being able to take those innovations and integrate them into a way of doing business. And I got to imagine you talked about onboarding, but offboarding is also very challenging under normal circumstances, whether it's contractors or employees that collect the equipment and turn off people's access and whatnot, and having automated workflows around onboarding and offboarding, make life a lot easier generally, irrespective of where people are working. But certainly when you have to collect equipment and, turn people's access off, knowing that it's happening and having it done for you or in a way that you get a very intelligent push that you have to take action, it can make a huge difference. So we have a couple of questions that have come in, and I want to read these and get your take on them. We had about 20 minutes left, so we have some time for additional discussion as well. So the first question, with the Army Corps of Engineers environment, so Devarius, this is addressed to you. With the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers environment, how are you addressing the management of encryption for data relative to key management and ensuring and countering any possibilities of breaches?
Yeah, so we have begun to evolve our IDAM, Identity Access Management capability. We're also leveraging various aspects of Zero Trust, going through the Zero Trust methodology. Because again, that's a conceptual thing, but the IDAM, Identity Access Management capability, is more so the execution and the enforcer. Good example of some of those things, we are inside of the O365 environment, leveraging the capabilities that Microsoft has, whether that's through their E3 or the Intune capability. That provides a lot of the IDAM aspects of things. And we are working to modernize our current IDAM platform right now as we speak. So from a data standpoint, not just looking at it from a Zero Trust methodology perspective, but also being able to understand from a virtual viewing aspects of things. So we begin to partition our data, restrict access, deny all, allow by exception. We've also begun to look at data from repositories, being able to take that data, the authoritative data from repositories, utilizing or leveraging an ETL-like capability, where at that ETL level, looking at the security aspects of things, and then being able to physically show that data to senior leaders to be able to make more informed decisions. So we are putting even more tighter controls around the data elements of things, because right now data is the golden key, and that's what we're really ultimately trying to protect. So the more controls we have, we implement. However, there is a sweet spot between the security as well as the mission aspects of things, because you can lock yourself down too tight to where you can't use it. So we've been working to find that sweet spot. I think we've been doing a good job, but it continues to keep us up at night, and we continue to fight that good fight to make sure we're totally secure. But those are some of the elements and aspects we've put in place at the core to kind of enhance some of the things we're doing around the security of our data.
Eric, you want to talk about data security? Data is clearly critical in your mission space.
It is, but actually I'm probably even more concerned about the access to the data. I came up through security, and yet security tools can prevent you access in an emergency too. Recently, while this was going on, we did a resiliency review of some of our data, and we have encrypted backups, and I asked them to recover it in a different silo, and it turned out this is part of the key management, which is the bugaboo of all the encryption. The only place that encryption key was kept was in the original tape silo. So it really couldn't be recovered anywhere else until we did the resiliency test and discovered that. The encryption key management is the bugaboo, and we rely on, unfortunately, on multiple methods. We use AD for some of our encryption key management. We use vendor supplied tools. You got to track that really carefully and test it pretty often.
Well, good insight from both of you there. I'm going to turn now to what comes next with the next question we have about the concept of returning into the workplace. So, what are your agencies thinking about relative to people continuing to work remotely, or possibly coming back into the workplace? Obviously, you had to ensure people's safety. You have to make sure that there's PPE. You have to make sure there's appropriate physical distancing, so on and so forth. I think this is all a lot harder than it sounds. What kinds of discussions are going on inside your agencies? Eric?
Yeah, so
Devarius, why don't you start? Go ahead.
well, from our side, I mean, it is really unpredictable. If someone tells me today, I know what tomorrow will look like, then I definitely like to understand and know what will tomorrow look like. So with that being said, I know one of the things that General Crawford continues to reiterate to us within the CIO community and the Army is that, IT has to be an enabler. It has to be always up and running, because we are in what we call the new now, not so much the new norm, because tomorrow, what is normal today may not be. It may be something different. So from the Army standpoint, the number one emphasis that they continue to emphasize is that it's people first and the safety of the employees. So not necessarily saying there's a rush to come back, but what we're trying to do is ensure that when that time comes for users to come back, we can properly ensure that they are safe. I think I was reading in several other news articles the other day that the workforce will never be 100%, and new employees will never know every individual that they work with going forward, because max capacity will be between 50 and 70%. So with that being said, operating in a remote environment will be how we operate for even the foreseeable. I mean, Google and not just Google, but Facebook and some of the others are exploring how do they ensure that their workers can work remote for the long haul without maybe ever going back into the office. So we have to prepare for that to be the new operating procedure, or even the current operating procedure. So from an Army standpoint, we haven't seen, especially within the Corps, we haven't seen a degradation in mission productivity. So that is a good thing. So to be able to continue to keep that going, that's the main goal and objective, because we never know when we might get back into the office. So the main thing is people first, and we continue to reiterate that. And when that time comes, we'll be ready to support whatever from an IT standpoint.
Yeah, Eric, thank you. Eric, what are you guys talking about at NIH?
As you can imagine, for the NIH, we're having a lot of very public discussions too. So even just this Monday, on July 6th, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins had a public web chat video cast about how the NIH would or wouldn't come back, and what rules, how people should follow the research, and how the NIH is going to follow the research too in returning. So we're looking at social distancing rules for the office. It's very much along the lines of what Devarius was saying. We're going to be very distant, even in the office, even as we come back. So for
just the simple act of taking an elevator is complicated. Elevators, they're packed in the morning, and everyone arrives, between 8:30 and 9 or whatnot. And now it's going to be 2 people per elevator. You could spend all morning waiting for your turn to get to your cube just to go back down for lunch. So, I think those little, nuances to return to work, are things people are beginning to think about. And how do we accommodate, for that? So, there's a lot of challenge here. So we're internally at ServiceNow, we're starting to have these same kinds of conversations. And, I think just some things that I've observed is that people want to hear what their organizations are doing. Just like you referenced, Eric, you had a webcast with senior leadership, and we had something similar, at our company. So that communication is something that can't be over communicated, perhaps. So I think we have another question. Devarius, again, this is for you, very popular. It says, when ETL, how do you manage the automatic connection to allow the data flow in and out? And for both Devarius and Eric, how do you have declassified and no ID data in a sandbox for outside teams to test and to test data process tools? So, Devarius, why don't you begin?
Yeah, so we're still working through some of those concepts now, because one size doesn't fit all. And when you begin to look at the many different areas to retrieve data, you have to be able to have a process that's enterprise encompassing and not just looking at one certain subset. Understanding from a department, we leverage classification of data from unclassed all the way up to TS, and even higher. So when you begin to look at those various classifications of data, you have to have a process that will prevent data from crossing over to different domains, but also be able to ensure that it's viewable at the end. So we've taken some of those use cases and beginning to look at those things. Again, our capability hasn't evolved to a maturity level 5 yet from an ETL standpoint. But we are identifying the use cases and identifying what's needed to get to that point now. So as we go through and work through this thing, we were going through to identify what's really needed. So at this point, I don't have an exact answer for you because we're still working through them, but here probably in the next 3 months or so, I think we'll have an even better handle on all of those things. But it's in the works now, so we're discovering and recovering and learning as we go.
Eric, anything you'd like to add there?
The NIH data, very different. Really, the NIH Clinical Center is the world's largest research hospital, so it's patient data that's really a lot of our focus. Yes, there's classified research data, but we concentrate a whole lot on patient data, which we've been de-identifying since the 1970s, really. So it's kind of 50 years of de-identifying data so that we can do things with it, including, like it says here in the question, putting it in a sandbox and actually testing. Our developers are actually approved. Everybody's got a public trust clearance at the least, so they can actually handle the data even when it isn't de-identified. Mm-hmm. But most of the work is done with de-identified data, actually. Lots of iterations of that.
Well, very good. Another question for the two of you. Will your organizations be looking more closely at robotic process automation, RPA, or other technologies to replace some labor-intensive tasks as we move into the quote-unquote new normal?
Yeah, that's going to be very tough because we thought we were relying on robotic processes already. But as it turns out, you kind of need a human right next to the robot almost every time right now.
What kinds of processes had you used RPA for?
Gene sequencing, actually lab experiments, mice, just everywhere. A lot of things are automated, but they often require someone writing a program right there or adjusting the program. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of robotic interface, but by golly, a lot of humans interfacing with those robots.
So I think you're talking about in a lab with, real robot technology, touching things and doing things. And, that's different than, maybe some of us have had exposure to. Sometimes RPA is used to take the mundane tasks, and simplify the data entry or other aspects of interaction with, the routine. And
sure. I do automatically think of a lab robot or a medical robot, but no, that's not what everybody is thinking of.
Yeah. So, so curious if there are any RPA implementations in either of your organizations, or are you considering it?
I said for us, we're considering everything is on the table here. Whether you look at robots for construction, or whether you're looking at RPAs from the aspects of AI and artificial intelligence, to be able to make more sense of data, trends, analysis, and those type of things. So we are looking at all of those aspects with our research arm, because we do have the ERDIC, which is the development center within the Corps, and they actually look at those things for us. So the challenge for us becomes now, how do we apply the research element aspects and operationalize it? So that's where we are running into some of our complex challenges, but we are looking at it, and it is on our technology radar to incorporate those things. So for FY21, we will be doing a lot of that within the Corps. Over.
Very good. So we're getting a little bit short on time. I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. So I want to give you guys a chance to share some lessons learned and final thoughts. We started with this conversation with thinking about, or recalling those immediate days after the pandemic struck, and how we were very focused on responding. And we talked a little bit then about how we and how your organizations are taking these changes you made and integrating them into how you operate to ensure that you're going to be ready for whatever comes next, which all sort of creates this great foundation for really digital organizations. And you both described great steps you're taking towards digitizing the work in your organization. So you've experienced a lot in the last 4 months. What are the key lessons you learned, and what are some things you want to make sure our audience takes away from this conversation?
Yeah, I can start off. I would say key things we've learned is, one, workforce, people. That the organization won't run unless the people are trained, well-equipped, and can do their job. So one of the things that we begin to do is we started on our campaign of what does the workforce of the future concept look like? And we've worked with Big Army at the headquarters level from a CIO standpoint to really address that. That means addressing the workforce in a remote capacity, ensuring that we can send them through the proper virtual training, certifications that's needed to be able to do the job. Because one of the things you'll see from a professional standpoint, we can become stagnant in our jobs. And with that being said, the technology so many times from a federal side of the house passes us by. So what we're trying to do is ensure that as we introduce new terms, data, ETL, Equinix facilities, two-factor authentication, and all these other things, that our federal civilian workforce can actually keep up with the change and pace of technology. So we've seen that if you don't invest in the people, then a lot of times the mission won't go. And then the last thing I'll say is ensuring that we can properly articulate the financial resources required to be able to move the mission forward. Because a lot of times in IT, one of the things you'll find out is that the IT budget, that's one of the first things to get slashed. And with that being said, it prevents you from being able to modernize, because now a budget becomes more about O&M and sustainment versus the modernization and the movement of technology. So being able to properly articulate to the stakeholders why modernization is critical and key, and what we need to do in order to achieve the success in which it is that we're looking for, those are the things that we've learned, because the money will drive everything. The requirements also drive it, and having the people to be able to do the work equals mission success on all fronts.
Yeah, it really becomes this change. You have to be able to change the conversation from IT as a commodity to IT as a strategic asset, and invest. You can't do what your organizations were able to do in a short period of time if you hadn't been making technology investments along the way. Having the opportunity to look at a number of different agencies and their response, some struggled more than others, and we saw that in the poll that we asked. And I would guess that the agencies that had more challenges were not forward-leaning when it came to technology and investing. You can't scale up an architecture like you did, Devarius, in a week if you don't have a good foundation. As Eric described, you can't rapidly acquire new technology and deploy it if you don't have a good foundation. So I applaud both of you and your organizations for showing good leadership, along the way, and you were able to respond better than others, I think. So congratulations, and share that back certainly with your teams. Now, Eric, I'd like to hear your lessons learned, and the wisdom you want to pass on to the audience.
I think I would emphasize again, you want to plan for the robustness of your infrastructure, every element of it. Got to keep going and keep reliable for all your staff. Like Devari said, it is about the people. They have to feel that their IT is dependable. This is not going to happen to many people often, but long ago in a job at the NIH, my boss pulled me in for a yearly review and said, "I've hardly heard anything about you all year. It must have been really good." So he was someone who understood. And actually, it had been very good. We've done tons of great things and had no real significant failures. But he understood that he hadn't heard, and and that's the way a lot of us will have to deal with it, I think. Like Devarius, we have actually emphasized some training. We've held Zoom training. We're going to hold Teams training as well. One thing that's been a little different, how do you handle blue screens on computers over a distance? That's something, as security patches roll out that actually do conflict with each other, we have run into. And so we're still working on the right methods for that, except we have to be fast.
Yeah, so service management's taken to a whole new level
Yes.
when you can't provide service in the way that you're used to providing it. You used to be able to walk over to that person's desk and fix their computer. Well, is what you're just describing, Eric, is the new reality. I have to have other ways of interacting with you and help and telling you what keys to click and how to get things resolved. That's a change for all of us, from the person providing the service and especially the person receiving the service. So this concept of service management, is here to stay. The idea of workflow, I think, is here to stay. That's where, we're seeing, I think, a lot of the innovation and change, especially when I might not have access to all the systems I have access to normally. I might not have access to all the data I have normally. How do we leverage the data in our legacy systems, some of the older technologies we have, and share it via workflow or use it via workflow to achieve an outcome? I think that's where a lot of our conversation has been heading, and it got there again very quickly over this past period. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and conclude. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot from both of you. Eric, I'm gonna go back and think about all of the data that you have and the way you need to use it and share it, and the sneaker net you described, give it to somebody on government equipment so they can have it to do their work. And I'm sure that's had an impact during this time that we where we've had this response. And Devarius, I'm going to when I think about this conversation, think about the moment that you heard that your network connections were severed by a third party, and how you not just how you must have felt, but how you and your team responded. It got back to the focus on people who were sick, in New York who needed those hospital beds stood up at the Javits Center, and the tremendous impact you and your team had during a time of national crisis. I mean, I hope you and everybody at the core, has a lot of pride in what you're able to do to help our country. It's a great story, and one that I'm happy that I had a chance to help tell today. So also want to thank everyone at ATARC for helping organize our panel. We're going to ATARC is going to be planning for our next webinar on Thursday, July 16th. We're going to have subject matter experts talk about how they are reevaluating technology needs during the pandemic. So I think it'll be a nice follow-on to the conversation that we've had today. We're going to, I think, be talking about this topic for some time to come. Additionally, ATARC is going to be hosting a IT acquisition summit, July 14th to 16th, and you have the ability to register now to hear from speakers about DevOps, cloud security, artificial intelligence. We're going to be focusing on best practices and in the IT category management sphere. I think that's going to be a very interesting day. I look forward to participating. So there's a lot of great stuff coming from from ATARC. I'm glad to be associated with this organization, be on the board, have ongoing conversations with Tom Suter and the team. So thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you at the next webinar and July 14th at our virtual summit. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.